The concrete mixer's rumble shattered the early morning silence, and Michael Rodriguez knew something was terribly wrong. He stood frozen on his back porch, coffee mug suspended midair, watching in disbelief as a team of construction workers began excavating a massive hole in what he had always believed was his private property. It was 6:30 a.m. on a crisp Saturday in September, and the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association had just crossed a line that would change everything. Michael had lived in the Sunnyside Estates subdivision for 15 years, a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Atlanta that prided itself on meticulously maintained common areas and strict community guidelines. He was no stranger to the HOA's bureaucratic tendencies, having served on the board himself for 2 years before stepping down due to growing frustrations with what he saw as increasingly aggressive management. But this was different. This was personal. The plot of land in question was a narrow strip of wooded area that Michael had purchased as an additional buffer between his property and the neighboring lot. It was part of a complex land deal when he first bought his home, a strategic acquisition that he had carefully documented with property surveys, legal contracts, and local county records. As the excavator bit into the earth, tearing up decades-old pine trees and disturbing the carefully preserved ecosystem, Michael felt a surge of anger rising within him. The HOA had not contacted him. They had not sent any official notices. They had not even attempted to verify the property lines. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Michael called out, walking towards the construction site. His voice was calm but carried an edge that could cut glass. The workers looked uncomfortable. Most of them were local contractors who seemed more interested in completing their job than engaging in a confrontation. One of them, an older man with sun-weathered skin and a worn hard hat, approached Michael. "Sir, we're just following the plans," the worker said, holding up a set of blueprints. "The HOA authorized this community pool project weeks ago." Michael snatched the plans, his trained eye quickly scanning the documents. His background in civil engineering made him immediately aware of something crucial. The proposed pool's location extended well beyond the HOA's designated common area. This wasn't just an encroachment. This was outright trespassing. The morning sun cast long shadows as Michael realized he was about to enter a battle that would test everything he thought he knew about property rights, community governance, and the sometimes dangerous intersection of bureaucratic overreach and individual property ownership. Little did the HOA know they had just picked a fight with the wrong homeowner. Michael Rodriguez was not the type to back down, and he was about to prove that sometimes the most powerful weapon against institutional arrogance was a combination of meticulous documentation, legal knowledge, and unwavering determination. The first scoop of earth had been turned. The war was just beginning. By Monday morning, Michael had assembled his arsenal of defense. Spread across his home office desk were property surveys dating back to 2008, tax records, and a meticulously organized file documenting every interaction he'd ever had with the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. His first call was to Elena Ramirez, a ruthlessly effective real estate attorney he'd worked with years ago. They had maintained a professional friendship, and Michael knew she would be brutally honest about his options. "This is more than just a boundary dispute," Elena said after listening to Michael's detailed account. Her voice was sharp, analytical. "They've not only trespassed, but have begun construction without proper legal verification. That's a serious violation." The initial estimate was grim but promising. Michael would need to file for an emergency injunction to halt construction, collect comprehensive evidence, and prepare for what could be a protracted legal battle. The HOA's actions weren't just careless, they were potentially criminal. Later that afternoon, Michael visited the county recorder's office. He requested multiple certified copies of his original land purchase documents, each page stamped with official seals that would serve as irrefutable evidence of his property lines. Meanwhile, the construction continued. Each day, more of his carefully maintained woodland was torn away, replaced by the skeletal framework of what the HOA claimed would be a community enhancement. Michael photographed every stage of destruction, time-stamping each image and backing them up to multiple secure locations. His neighbors watched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The Oak Ridge HOA was known for its aggressive tactics, and most residents preferred to avoid confrontation. But Michael had always been different. Where others saw an intimidating bureaucracy, he saw a system that could be challenged with the right approach. That evening, he received an official letter from the HOA. The letterhead was crisp, the language formulaic, a standard cease and desist order claiming they had mistaken the property boundaries. But Michael knew better. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated overreach. "They think they can intimidate me," he muttered, carefully filing the letter with a growing collection of evidence. "They have no idea what's coming." Behind the scenes, Elena was preparing the legal groundwork. She reached out to a land surveyor who specialized in property boundary disputes, someone who could provide expert testimony if the case went to court. The pool's concrete foundation was now taking shape, a stark gray scar across the landscape Michael had lovingly preserved for years. Each day of construction was another day of potential damages, another piece of evidence for their eventual legal confrontation. Michael knew the road ahead would be difficult. The HOA had deep pockets and a history of wearing down opposition, but he also knew something they had grossly underestimated. His resolve was far stronger than their bureaucratic machinery. This was no longer just about a piece of land. This was about principle, about standing up to an organization that believed it was above the law. And Michael Rodriguez was prepared to fight, not just for himself, but for every homeowner who had ever felt powerless against an overreaching HOA. The first hearing arrived 3 weeks after the initial construction began. Michael sat in the county courthouse, his file of documentation thick and organized, Elena Ramirez beside him looking like a predator about to strike. The HOA's legal team was everything Michael had expected. 3 corporate attorneys in matching charcoal suits, their collective demeanor suggesting this was just another routine dispute they easily dismiss. Lead counsel Thomas Hartley, a silver-haired man with the confident swagger of someone used to winning, seemed almost bored by the proceedings. Mr. Rodriguez claims property interference, Hartley stated dismissively to the judge, but our surveys indicate a potential boundary discrepancy that allows for community development. Elena's response was swift and surgical. She presented not just Michael's original land purchase documents, but a comprehensive geological survey that definitively proved the contested land was part of his private property. Her expert witness, Dr. Margaret Chen, a renowned land surveying specialist, testified with clinical precision about the exact property lines. What the HOA didn't know was that Michael had discovered something even more damaging during his investigation. Through careful research and conversations with longtime neighborhood residents, he uncovered a pattern of similar boundary mistakes by the HOA, a history of aggressive land appropriation that had gone unchallenged. During a brief recess, Michael overheard Hartley speaking quietly with another attorney. "We've done this before," he muttered. "Most owners just cave under legal pressure." They didn't know Michael Rodriguez. The judge, a stern woman in her late 50s named Elizabeth Warbach, listened intently. Her questions were pointed, her skepticism evident. She requested additional documentation and set a follow-up hearing, but her preliminary comments suggested the HOA was on shaky legal ground. Outside the courthouse, local media had caught wind of the story. A small group of neighborhood residents approached Michael, sharing stories of their own encounters with the HOA's heavy-handed tactics. What had started as a personal battle was transforming into something larger, a potential community uprising against institutional overreach. Elena pulled Michael aside after the hearing. "They're going to fight hard," she warned. "This isn't just about a piece of land anymore. This is about their entire method of operation." The construction on the disputed land had temporarily halted, blocked by the judge's preliminary injunction. But Michael knew this was just the beginning. The HOA would not surrender easily, and the real battle was yet to come. That night, reviewing the day's events, Michael reflected on the broader implications. This wasn't just about him or his land. It was about standing up to a system that presumed power meant impunity. Every document, every piece of evidence was a weapon, and he was prepared to use them all. The pool project had become more than a construction dispute. It was now a statement, a line drawn in the sand about property rights, community governance, and the fundamental principle that no organization is above the law. The next 2 months were a crucible of legal maneuvering and personal strain. Michael's life had been transformed from a peaceful suburban homeowner to a full-time legal warrior. His engineering background proved invaluable as he meticulously documented every aspect of the HOA's actions, cross-referencing historical records and creating a comprehensive timeline that would become crucial to their case. Elena discovered something explosive during deep background research. The HOA's current president, Robert Grayson, had a history of similar land disputes in 2 previous communities. Confidential settlement documents revealed a pattern of quiet payouts and non-disclosure agreements that had previously swept such issues under the rug. But this time would be different. Michael's neighborhood began to change. What started as whispers became a groundswell of support. Neighbors who had previously been intimidated by the HOA's tactics now approached him with their own stories of bureaucratic overreach. Sarah Thompson, a retired school teacher who lived 2 streets over, brought him a folder of documents detailing a similar incident that had happened to her brother in another state. "They count on people being afraid," Sarah told him one afternoon, her eyes blazing with a newfound sense of rebellion. "Nobody's ever stood up to them before." The financial toll was significant. Michael had to take a leave of absence from his engineering consulting job, dedicating himself fully to the legal battle. His savings were rapidly depleting, but he was beyond the point of no return. This was no longer just about a piece of land. It was about principle. Elena's investigative work uncovered another critical piece of information. The pool construction project had been hastily approved without the standard community vote required by the HOA's own bylaws. Furthermore, the construction contract was awarded to a company with direct ties to Robert Grayson. a potential conflict of interest that could blow the entire case wide open. Social media began to pick up the story. A local news station ran an investigative piece that went viral, highlighting the potential systematic abuse by homeowners associations. Michael found himself becoming an unexpected symbol of resistance against institutional bullying. The psychological warfare was intense. Anonymous letters arrived, some veiled threats, others attempting to intimidate. The HOA's legal team tried multiple tactics to pressure Michael into settling, offering increasingly desperate compromise proposals. But Michael Rodriguez was not backing down. During a tense strategy session, Alina laid out their most potent weapon. They created a paper trail a mile long, she said, spreading documents across the conference table. Every misstep, every unauthorized action, it's all here. We're not just fighting for your land anymore. We're exposing a systemic problem. The partially constructed pool stood as a monument to the HOA's hubris, a half-finished concrete shell that now symbolized their potential downfall. What they had intended as a community enhancement had become their greatest liability. Michael looked out over the disputed land, now barren and scarred by construction. He knew the final act of this battle was approaching. The HOA had made a critical mistake. They had chosen the wrong person to underestimate. The final hearing was nothing short of a judicial earthquake. What began as a local property dispute had transformed into a landmark case that would redefine HOA accountability in the state of Georgia. The courtroom was packed with local media, community members, and even representatives from other homeowners associations watching intently. Judge Rohrbach's ruling was decisive and scathing. She not only granted Michael complete victory, but went further. The HOA was ordered to completely restore Michael's land to its original state, pay substantial damages, and Robert Grayson was forced to resign from his position. The judge's 47-page opinion meticulously documented the HOA's systematic pattern of overreach, turning the case into a precedent-setting moment for property rights. The partially constructed pool, a concrete scar on Michael's property, would become a symbol of institutional arrogance defeated. Alina Ramirez's triumph was complete. Her strategic brilliance had not just won a case, but exposed a broader systemic issue of HOA misconduct. Within months, her law firm was flooded with similar cases from homeowners across the state who had been emboldened by Michael's stand. At the victory celebration, surrounded by neighbors who had become allies, Michael reflected on the journey. What had started as a personal battle had become a community movement. Sarah Thompson, the retired teacher, who had first brought him additional documentation, raised a toast. "You did what no one else dared to do," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. The financial and personal cost had been immense. Michael's consulting job was gone, his savings depleted, but he had something far more valuable, a restored sense of justice and the respect of an entire community. Robert Grayson's fall from grace was complete. The investigation triggered by Michael's lawsuit revealed multiple instances of financial impropriety. Criminal charges were eventually filed, though Michael took no pleasure in the personal destruction. This had never been about vengeance, but about principle. 1 year after the first excavator had torn into his land, Michael stood on his property. The land was healing, young pine trees already sprouting where the destructive construction had occurred. Native grasses were reclaiming the scarred earth, a natural restoration that felt symbolic of his own journey. The HOA, once a seemingly invincible bureaucratic machine, had been fundamentally transformed. New leadership implemented transparent practices, and a community-wide referendum was established to prevent future arbitrary decisions. Michael Rodriguez had never set out to be a hero. He was simply a man who understood the value of standing up for what was right, who refused to be bullied by a system that presumed its own infallibility. As the sun set over Sunnyside Estates, casting long shadows across the restored landscape, one thing was clear: sometimes a single person's determination can change everything.